So even if you're well-meaning and you consider yourself an inclusive business owner, if you're using the tools without awareness, your business can end up replicating exclusion.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Represented Podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about something that every online business owner needs to hear. That's right. Every online business owner needs to hear this. There is a new face of bias in our industry, and it's not always obvious. In fact, it's showing up in the very tools we're using every single day. I'm talking about artificial intelligence bias, AI bias. Now, if you've been a long-time listener of this podcast, you know this is not the first time I'm talking about it, and it won't be the last. If you are a first-time listener, I'm so glad you're here because there is so much awareness that is needed around AI bias. We are now using AI tools more and more. In fact, a study from MIT has projected that in the next 10 years, over 40% of households will be using AI-generated tools to help with chores around the house, chores like cooking, cleaning, and laundry. And I'm thinking, wow, that blows my mind. And in particular, I'm looking back at my days when my kids were really, really young, newborn stage, and how much that would have been a dream come true because my husband and I have raised our children away from our village. And by village, I mean all the helping hands that we had back home in Kenya. Aunties, uncles, grandparents, cousins, all the people who come and help make the load lighter. They're cooking, they're cleaning, they're taking care of the kids. We had none of that. And so we've really just raised our kids, the two of us. And so the thought of having something that can cook and clean and do laundry honestly sounds like a dream. And I understand that it's not just the exciting parts of AI, there's also the other parts of AI that we need to think about. Like with everything good, there are cons as well. But one of the things I've been digging into is the potential of cognitive decline with the rising use of AI. As we assign more and more tasks to AI, we're putting less and less of our brains to work. Now, I just want you to pause and ask a question here for you to think about. Have you noticed yourself leaning more on AI lately? And as you think about that, I also want you to think about what tasks have you stopped doing yourself? They're things that you used to do, but you've now stopped doing them yourself. Because it's got me thinking, when we're operating from an autopilot posture, we're bound to miss things, especially as our AI tools get more efficient. They're getting smarter. And in so doing, we as humans, we want to do less, but we still want to produce more. We still want to serve and we still want to make a profit. I mean, we're running businesses, so we still want to make profit. But what impact will that have on our businesses and more so the clients we are holding space for? And that's got me thinking. And a recent conversation brought it home in a very different way. I was chatting with a new friend, an online business owner who's based over in Canada. She had reached out after downloading my AI bias guide, and she was surprised to learn some of the information I had shared. She prides herself on using a human first approach when it comes to AI tools, but there were areas she hadn't considered. As we spoke about race, she told me she sees herself as an inclusive person and shared the ways she practices inclusion. And she admitted she hadn't really thought about how people who have been historically excluded, marginalized, or underserved might feel in her presence. Her default was, I'm a good person, I'm inclusive. I'm surrounded by people from diverse backgrounds, and so I don't need to do more by way of educating myself because I'm already inclusive. But it was during that conversation that it actually occurred to her, do these people actually feel included? Do they feel comfortable in my presence? And when she asked that question, that was such a big aha for both of us because so often people who advocate for inclusion don't see the need to keep learning. They already believe they're inclusive. And after our connection call, I really got to thinking about that some more. And it reminded me of my faith as a Christian. I wanted to liken this to something. And I told myself, I imagined, what if I said to myself, well, I'm already a Christian, so I don't need to go to church. I don't need to read my Bible or even pray. I'm good. Like, I'm already a Christian. But how would I grow if I'm not continually in the presence of knowledge, if I'm not continually learning and even hearing the things that I know over and over again? Because sometimes the more you hear something, not only do you understand it more, but sometimes you get to hear it in a different light and understand it differently, like it hits differently. And the same goes for you, my friend. How are you growing as an inclusive business owner? Are you auditing your business for inclusion? Are you investing in continuous personal development? Is your network diverse? And is that diversity growing? Because it's so easy to rest on the belief, that mindset that I'm inclusive, I'm already inclusive, and just stop right there. But with the rise of AI tools and the potential for bias, now more than ever, we have to educate ourselves. And I know many of us are educating ourselves on how to use AI effectively, but we also need to educate ourselves on the bias it holds. There's data bias, there's algorithmic bias, and human bias. And all these feed into the AI tools we use. This is exactly why this conversation matters so much, because AI is reshaping the way we market, it's reshaping the way we connect, and it's also reshaping the way we grow our businesses. So, unless we are paying attention, we risk embedding bias into the very foundations of our work, even as the inclusive business owners we say we are. In the age of AI, the gap between good intentions and inclusive action is widening. And here's what I mean. I want to give you a few examples. Number one, when you run ads on Facebook or Instagram, algorithms are deciding who sees them. Studies have shown that these algorithms exclude certain people from seeing certain opportunities. For example, people of color are often excluded. And not because you asked this tool to exclude them, but because the system has learned from biased data and it replicates that. Another example is when you use AI tools to generate images, they often default to white, Eurocentric representations. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, my daughter was working on a story she'd written, a beautiful story. She's really talented in storytelling and has the ability to just bring a story alive on a page. She decided she wanted to ask AI to create an image of the story she'd written. Now, AI did a great job. It illustrated the visual really, really well. In fact, my daughter was so excited. She's like, Mom, this is exactly what I was talking about in my story. The only thing is the character was a white girl. It made that assumption. It defaulted to whiteness, even though the girl in the story was not white. Another example is when it comes to hiring platforms. Now, my background's in HR, and so this is something that I saw play out all of the time. And even when we were not using machines or AI tools back in the day, there was so much human bias, which has now fed into these hiring platforms because they filter candidates. People with ethnic sounding names are more likely to be overlooked, even if their qualifications are the same. I saw that. And I remember watching an interview Barack Obama was sharing, and he was talking about the barriers that get in the way of people being given equal opportunities and a lot of times, names often dictate who gets selected for a job interview and who doesn't. So, a name like Barack Obama may not be selected because it lacks that Eurocentric sounding name. But a name like John Smith is more likely to be selected, even though Barack may be more qualified for the role. So, even if you're the most well meaning, inclusive business owner, if you're using these tools without that awareness, your business can end up replicating exclusion. One of the things I was doing when I was in HR was trying to push back and say, okay, so we've shortlisted this kind of people. How about this group of people? They have skills that supersede this other group of people. Why aren't we shortlisting them? And a lot of the times, the response I'd get is, well, this other group of people are just a better fit. We feel like culturally, they will be a better fit for the organization. Now, if you're not pushing back and asking those questions, those things will go unchecked, and we will continue to perpetuate systems of exclusion. And that's what I'm trying to drum here on this podcast. So even if you're well-meaning and you consider yourself an inclusive business owner, if you're using the tools without awareness, your business can end up replicating exclusion. If you're a coach, a consultant, or course creator, you know your work is about people. It's about holding space, creating transformation, and offering services that change lives. But if AI bias is shaping who gets to see you, who feels represented by your content, the kind of language that you're using, or who feels a sense of safety in your programs because of the people who make up your community, then whole groups of people, whole communities are actually being left out. And it may not be visible right now, But as we continue to use these tools more and more, when we look back years from now, it is possible we may see a bigger gap than exists today, simply due to our reliance on AI tools. This is why it's not enough to just be a good human or feel that we are already inclusive and it ends there. We need to be bias-aware business owners. Let me say that again so it sinks in. We need to be bias-aware business owners. So how do we do that? I'm so glad you asked. The good news is awareness is the first step. Once you see it, you can do something about it. And that is exactly what gives me hope. It's actually what excites me. AI bias gives us a very practical entry point into racial equity work. It's not abstract, it's real, it's measurable even, and it's something we can begin addressing right now in our businesses. Remember the example I gave you about the AI-generated image from my daughter's story? We were able to push back, ask questions as to why it generated the girl in that image as white, so we could understand what are the markers, what led to that bias, and then put measures in place that it needs to ask more questions around X, Y, and Z in order to create something that depicts the storyteller and not defaulting to the dominant culture. There's more work that needs to be done so that this tool is operating in a more inclusive way. And that required us to push back, to ask questions, to understand the way in which it's been wired. If you're saying to yourself, okay, Annie, you've got my attention. How do I become AI bias aware? I'm so happy to let you know that I've created a free 3-day experience, and I'm calling it AI Bias Aware. I'll walk you through how to spot AI bias in your business, how to respond to it, and how to start building inclusive practices into the tools you're already using. I also want to invite you, if you haven't already, to download my AI Bias Guide for coaches and course creators. It's a simple, practical resource that shows you the most common ways bias shows up and what you can do differently. Now, you'll find both the guide and the sign up for the experience linked in the show notes. Remember, AI bias is not going away, but we can reduce it. And that's why the 3-day AI bias aware experience is such a great opportunity for us to come together, to learn, to ask questions, and to actually begin to look at our tools through a more critical lens that questions and pushes AI to be more inclusive. So let me leave you with this thought. Being good and kind is great. Lord knows we need more of that, more than ever in the current times we're all navigating. The future of business belongs to those who choose to see what's really happening and do something about it. Now you know AI bias exists. Please don't just sit back and wait for those who work in AI ethics to come up with solutions. Let's play our role. Head over to anigishuru.com/experience to sign up, and I cannot wait to be in community with you virtually.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. P. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented from coast to coast.